Well, good evening and hello, everyone. Today is July the 14th, 2020. This is Wes Fryer in Oklahoma City, being joined by Brian Turnbaugh, again coming to us from Chicagoland. And more specifically, Brian, we don't want your street address. We're talking about conspiracies and culture wars here.
Yeah.
But what general part of Chicago do you live in?
Batavia.
And where? And I'm
Western suburbs.
Okay, the western suburbs. So as far west, like if I'm flying into Midway, am I Midway is more central, isn't it? I got to go west.
Midway's actually like O'Hare's like Midway, and then O'Hare is like in the middle of the city, just west of the city, in a little town called Rosemont. That's just in between Chicago and the airport. It's a very weird kind of peninsula that goes out. So there's like Chicago and there's all these like little suburbs. Then Chicago actually owns the O'Hare part. So that's like kind of cuts like right through the middle. And then Midway is like more the south side of Chicago, that south side, southern part of Chicago, out that way. So
and you're west of both.
Yeah, about 36 miles west, 38. So
yeah, I know where Lake Michigan is.
Yeah,
I know where the airports are. I've been to Northwestern. That's about it.
So just somewhere between Chicago and DeKalb. That's about where we are, and that's where NIU is. So, yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Well, this is our third recorded conversation about a project called Conspiracies and Culture Wars, and here in less than a week, right? Next week is going to be the virtual Institute of Summer Institute of Digital Literacy. So Brian has been there several times. I've been there once. We've never done it virtually, but we have been brainstorming a project for a while, and we are continuing to basically hash through some different ideas for a session, which I think is officially maybe on the website. We got an email from Julie and had shared a title. And so if you have checked out, I'll include in the show notes links to our first two conversations, but basically, this came from a whole lot of Twitter direct messages and podcast links and articles and videos and different things that have related to broadly media literacy. More specifically, I would say conspiracies, the ways in which social media has been weaponized, becoming more knowledgeable and savvy about the ways that not only disinformation, but what some would call misinformation and malinformation are shared as propaganda for political purposes. And so last time we were focused on thinking maybe we were going to, talk about the Apollo moon landing, which I still don't think is a bad idea, but I played with some of our ideas in terms of just trying them out. And I guess it's a good thing. Like I didn't quickly, stumble upon, conspiracy stuff. And my son had pointed out, who's, very savvy and has actually shared several different, great media literacy resources and perspectives. He pointed out that we're really trying to game this and not do this in an organic way. And YouTube really does work through not just what you search for and click on, but what you watch a lot, and it watches you watching YouTube. And so and then the other thing that came out was like asking people, whether they're students or anybody, to use their own personal channel or their school channel or whatever, an actual, Google YouTube account that they control, and then doing searches. Like, I don't know that there's ethics to that. Maybe there is, but there certainly could be, unwanted effects because, when you click a link on Instagram, when you search for something, it does become part of your watch history. There are ways to clear those kind of things out. So anyway, that's a little bit of background, but you've been thinking about some different tacks that we can take with this. And I know you shared that link for tools and things. So where has your thinking gone in the past week about all of this?
Well, I mean, just in terms of like getting people up to date, kind of like, show like what this is. So prior to hitting record here today and broadcasting here, I was mentioning that like one of the things that if we want to kind of show, how does this work, right? And one of the classic examples of this is, I mean, there are many, obviously, but one I think comes back to there was a Louisiana chemical plant that blew up on 9/11 in 2014. And this was something that penetrated into the news. CNN had a whole bunch of, apparently some Twitter about it. But what you come to realize, like, this was actually just a concerted disinformation campaign. Just kind of see it. In some ways, it's kind of like, you remember that scene in Jurassic Park where the velociraptors were trying to kind of go after the fence, where are the weak parts of the fence? Like, this was kind of like one of those early kind of tests, against a media system to see, how far can we actually take this? So I think that would be a really good, maybe an opening, element to say, like, look, this is a way in which disinformation can come at us, and one that actually kind of went fairly deep into the media ecosystem. To illustrate what disinformation is. Misinformation is a little bit more tricky because disinformation definitely has intent, where misinformation sometimes has intent but may not, right? And so there was an example of this last week. You might remember, there are many examples. This is just one that I trapped and saw. As you know, that there was a controversy surrounding Goya beans and foods, and there was a Twitter picture that said, "Haha! Look, everyone loves Goya now. All of the pantry space in the store is gone, where all the Goya products are." So it's like, see, because you guys said you didn't like Goya and you're going to protest it, it's only created the opposite. It was like the Streisand effect of consumer purchasing, right? So like, if you boycott it, we'll show you that we're going to go out and buy it. So, but upon a little bit further scrutiny of this picture, of the framing of it, when you look at the picture, it was in a Trader Joe's. They don't sell Goya products there. So that's not there. You look a little bit closer, and the people that are in the store are wearing winter jackets. That seems kind of odd for July, right? And so just the mere presence of just a little bit more scrutiny of the forensic details of the photo would show that this is not what you say it is. But people will use that information in such a way. So the question is, was that the person who originally used that picture, maybe they were using that for disinformation reasons, but by the time it maybe got kind of thrown through the ecosystem, it became maybe misinformation at that point. And I think that would be a really good example of that. Same thing with, there was a video last week, we may have talked about it, where there was a video from Diamond and Silk, which are supporters of the president, that had posted something that was basically challenging the efficacy of masks. It came from Good Morning America, and people are like, well, clearly Good Morning America is a standard-based journalism. If they're saying it must be true, but then upon just the slightest bit of scrutiny, you see that segment came from late February. This was posted to their Facebook page in July. So the question is, was that a bad faith disinformation from Diamond and Silk, or the people who handle their social media, to present old information in a way to kind of then create more confusion and kind of get at what the thing that we're talking about is, how misinformation, disinformation is used to drive certain wedges between us in terms of what we are trying to accomplish as a civil society, and then embrace our civic duty to understand truth and make well-designed decisions based upon that.
Wow. Using Wikipedia as a source of checking some of those kinds of things, and then I'm thinking about sort of a Padlet, of some of these different situations, because depending upon what you're tracking and news you're following, I mean, you may or may not have caught some of these things, historically or contemporary, in contemporaneous terms. I put a couple links into. I can't actually share to Facebook because it's my Facebook. I can share to a page, but not to my Facebook channel. So we do have a few live viewers. Hello, if you're out there, and we'd love to have you chime in on comments with questions or thoughts. This link, the medialiteracy.wesfryer.com/concw, is where we've got a lot of our project resources and our past conversations. That's the Wikipedia article that Brian was just talking about, or the Wikipedia article for the event in 2014 that Wikipedia calls the Colombian chemicals plant explosion hoax. I like that idea of having a series of different events, and I'm in our Google Doc. I've been putting some notes from our previous conversation, so I started a new category there at the bottom called Notes 14 July, and just started to put some of those in there.
Let me add one more layer to that too. So, and then I had a third part. I was just kind of like sketching down an outline, and I think the discussion on TikTok is still very interesting as well, right? So. There was news a few weeks ago. I think I sent this to you, Wes, and I'm trying to remember if this has been something I haven't followed up to see if it's been resolved or not. But there was a slight hitch in the iOS from Apple on the iPhones that was, for some reason, any copy that you would use on your phone was also being maybe sent back to TikTok information. There's something like, well, why exactly is that going on, right? So yeah. that should be kind of investigated a little bit further, right? About to what extent is there a true firewall between what is this company that says that they have complete independence from China and all of their decisions, but I mean, who can really how can we even really press that? But the other thing too that's interesting too is we also know that there has been some organization on TikTok about whether or not to kind of artificially jam the expectation numbers of certain Trump rallies, right? So really on both sides of the issue, we can say like, look, if you don't support the president and you see this information from Goya, that's not good either. But you should also be equally as kind of concerned about if this technology is also being facilitated to game our political process, even if you agree with it, right? So I mean, like, you may not be a fan of the Trump rallies and all that stuff, but if this technology is that it might be also being pushed by certain forces as well, that might deserve a kind of a kick on the tires too, to kind of figure out what's going on there. So I thought that was kind of, there was, I think, a New York Times article that was suggesting that as well a few weeks ago about, was there anything to kind of, is there smoke and fire with that idea? So and I think that kind of gets to the other idea about what are the type of active measures, which is a type of propaganda technique that's used between global powers, right? So if we're going to use information in such a way, so that would be another way to maybe introduce some vocabulary through examples with that. So we could maybe begin with the Colombian chemical fire, go into the Goya to then kind of illustrate what misinformation, disinformation is, and then talk about active measures, perhaps using TikTok as a very contemporaneous example of why that could be perhaps problematic.
I think getting people to practice some web literacy strategies, and I've been using and probably advocating the most for the SIFT one that the Dave Quinn talked about at the conference last year. Mike Holden talks about, which in addition to stop for emotional content or things that get you to have an emotional response. I mean, one of the checking for corroborating resources and lateral reading is one of the most important things. I mean, I think if we have an activity, because originally we thought, well, hey, let's just dive into the moon landing and do that. I still want to do a moon landing Apollo related activity with my own students, I think. And I still like that. I still like that idea. But yeah, if we have a variety of different, recent and somewhat recent events that have happened, and then ask people to explore those, and think about what they're going to do to find more information and be able to ascertain validity and shareability. I think that would probably be good.
So I have a couple of, so I think then maybe what could happen after we go through the TikTok example or whatever, we could go back to like, what are the 5 principles of media literacy? But what we get to number 5 is actually number 1 when what we're talking about. Why are we seeing any of this stuff? Is because it's about power, right? I mean, this is so we can obviously go through all the various different techniques and who the audience is and all that other stuff. But I think what we can start with is that, look, what's really the underpinning structure of all this is what is driving this. Who and why is this? For what purpose is this message being sent? It is precisely to acquire power or diminish power of the other side, depending on how it is being implemented. So that might be a way of kind of approaching the 5 pillars of media literacy, but just maybe in some ways flipping it around, just say, like, just so we know, like, we're going to kind of we'll work our way from 5 to 1 as the way in which this seems to be working now, to understand the forces that are pushing this, but then see how they are then, and really in some ways we're just going after the rhetorical triangle in similar ways, which is that we, who's the sender, who's the audience, what methods are they using to advance the message in the most productive and force magnifier way. And so that's where I think the SIFT message, or the SIFT, can work very well. I had been playing around with an activity, and I went to it's to the we live by a really nice river. It's the Fox River, and so I took a picture, and I can make a type of a fake tweet from CNN, and in that picture I can leave enough details in this tweet that which we can have them execute those lateral searches that are within it. Mm-hmm. Right. So the picture is, and I had messed around with it earlier in the summer, but my phone didn't capture the detail easy enough. So I actually took the picture again, so it'll be obvious. So it's a picture of my daughter standing face away from the camera, and it is her, and there's enough of the river there, and I say something, this is and you can put the right date in it, and I can put where it happens, so you can completely fabricate the tweet, and it could be a CNN headline or whatever. And so and then you load it in such a way where you leave enough of the breadcrumbs out to say, how do you know this is true, or how do you know that it's not true? And so what would be the things that we would look at in this particular tweet to then unpack, to then model that? And I think that might be that would be a way to kind of walk through the various mindset of how we do it, but then also create that type of scrutiny and skepticism that empowers the students to know, you got to look this way, because you have to immediately. It's kind of like, you don't just go to the store and buy meat that isn't properly dated. You have to look at various different things to know whether or not this is okay to bring into my home. And you should also take similar steps of, is this something I need to bring into my index of information to make judgments on? And so these are the things that you have to do. It's just the game has changed.
I wonder if we could actually kind of do a pre and post, because, and I love this. I think the idea here of maybe a Padlet and exploring some different contemporary headlines. And then I was thinking about a pre and post, like we have an activity like that where we're going to invite people to use the skills that you have. I kind of think like teaching can be this way too. When you have a new challenge to walk into, I went with my friend Kevin Honeycutt. This was years ago. He was volunteering to teach art classes at a juvenile detention center in Wichita, Kansas, or maybe it was in Hutchinson where he lived. But man, tough teaching. You bring whatever skills you have to the challenge. Web literacy is like that now. We are facing all kinds of things that are coming at us. Maybe it's from Facebook, from Twitter, from mainstream news, from all these different places. And we got to use the skills that we have. And I think maybe it could be valuable to invite people to use the skills that they're bringing to the workshop, kind of like in a pre and post, and document some of those. Because some of the things that we've historically told students and we've told each other about how to validate information is really not great anymore. Like, oh, that's a .org site, or oh, that I went to the about page and it's very professional looking, or some of those kinds of things. And then we could and I love the pillars of media literacy. Would you believe I don't think I've formally reviewed those before? Those are great. So we kind of have a teaching part in the middle, and then we ask people to do it again with another, either tweet or Facebook post or something like that. I think going to Wikipedia, especially for the source, to take a look at, what kind of debate is there? Is there debate around this source? Who do the brokers of Wikipedia, who obviously have to deal with very contentious polar, extremes of opinion, what do they say about that? That as a structure sounds kind of good, because we would be getting people active in a couple times. But I like the idea of trying to uncover what people are bringing to a web literacy challenge right now. And then could we, help give some additional skills and give people a chance to practice those?
Yeah, and I would say we don't even need to even go back into the Wikipedia, because these are, I think the moment that it stinks, you move on. You don't need to invest any more time in something that is already proven to be something that is trying to mislead you. You don't, the moment that it becomes perfectly apparent that this has shown you what it is, do not engage. It's kind of not anymore.
That's exactly right. Kristen Hokinson is with us, as well as Jonas Hamilton. Hello, everyone. And Kristen saying in the chat, if we need help with Pathright, she could give help. I did get my account set up, and do need to play with that, because actually that's where we need to build this activity, I think. Have you worked with that before, Brian?
No, I only as a student, not as a.
So maybe we could do something.
I don't think that I think it's as much as we need to. It may be that I don't know that every activity. It may be that we only need two steps along the way.
Yeah.
So
if we build a slideshow, we can start a Google slideshow after.
That's all you got to do. Yeah.
And have these elements of the activity in there. So I'm doing a keynote on Thursday morning for the Mountain Moot, which they've got 650 people registered for now. I'm going to start with a story that is, we could even use this as an example, but this was about 2 weeks ago. My wife was sharing a Facebook post by a friend of ours, and it was about President Trump, and it was saying, "Hey," she said, "Wow, is even half of this true? Amazing!" And then it is huge. It was scroll down multiple pages of all these different things that were achievements and things that there's no possible way, because it's literally machine gunning you these little facts. And at the very bottom, so she was reading this to me. I said, just stop for a second. I said, is there a source? Can you go down to the bottom? And she read the acronym, I said, let's Google that. Well, that's a QAnon acronym. And she had no idea. In fact, no one else, well, I don't know if my son did, but at least two of our daughters and my wife, they'd never heard of QAnon before. And I said, stop. We really don't have to go further with this, because this is political propaganda by a far right extremist group that, alleges that a child sex trafficking ring in New York City.
It's like, just even when you just begin to explain what it is to people, you feel crazy that you even know what they stand for. Even infects you when you have to explain. Like, I'm the sane one, but when I have to then explain to you how this group, and I thought what was really interesting, I think we talked about this last week, was the interview from Your Undivided Attention, where they interviewed the person who was the expert on that. And what was so fascinating about that was that they've built into their, I don't know if we'd call it their narrative or their cult structure of this, which is, no matter what we say, we can absorb the lie or the shifting goalposts of it, because we said it's all part of the plan. I mean, it's the same thing. So it's the same structure of when a doomsday cult and the comet doesn't take us all out. Like, well, your prayers work better, so we moved it back, or I didn't have the math right on it, so it's all a joke. But it's people are into it, but it's laughable.
So, unfortunately, like I said, I can't post right here from StreamYard into. We can post into a page, but not on my channel. But I posted this onto the YouTube feed, and that is a fantastic podcast. And so this is actually a segue. This is on Your Undivided Attention, the Center for Humane Technologies podcast, one of the best podcast channels for you to subscribe to. And this is called The World According to Q. So 2 questions. I'm going to give in the keynote Thursday some media consumption homework. And so what I did was I came up with my 3 most impactful media artifacts that I think can really help be educative in this whole idea of conspiracies and culture wars. So my 3, not surprising, I know to you, The Prophet by Reply All, episode 112, which is not really for kids. It is not for kids. I mean, it has to do with sexual assault, and it is a, I would say, college level and older, but it is really an eye-opening episode. I put the Smarter Every Day video, manipulating the YouTube algorithm, which in terms of the way that YouTube is weaponized, and telling the story of how people are working in social media to try and influence mainstream media and to get things to trend and get, people like you were talking about, that Louisiana, refinery, fake fire, hoax fire, to pay attention. My 3rd one was The World According to Q, Your Undivided Attention. Yeah. Can you think of anything else that you would also just put on that list? And that could be a book too, that you'd say, wow, if you're going to read something, read this. If you're going to listen to something.
There's so much. I mean, I think one of the best books that I've read that I and there's so many that I think that are really important, but the one more recent one, and I think I put this on our resource page, was P.W. Singer's recent book. I'm drawing a blank on whose co-author was. Like War. I thought it was accessible. Yeah. I thought it provided an incredible history of how it began and how it's accelerated. I would say it was brilliant. The other part too, I mean, it would be, I mean, it's, if you're reading a book, then you can go through an 8-series podcast, but Rabbit Hole was incredible as well, in terms of seeing the cultivation of the type of personality that would fall for these types of information ecosystems, and then to see how they were able to kind of get turned around in such a way, I thought was curious as well. I thought that was a very, very, very well done podcast series.
Well, I think we should keep building out, and I need to spend some more time with that list on our document. Again, if you'd like to see these resources, you can go to medialiteracy.wesfryer.com/concw. We've got a link to the Google Doc. this is actually a hugely beneficial media literacy service that you've provided for me, Brian, the past year. As you filter the web, you have different trusted sources and information streams, and you know, are sharing things that are specific to this general topic and arena. You know, this is why people go to college. This is why people would go talk to a librarian. Like, there's so much information out there. You want to go to someone who is steeped in that particular field, that particular genre, and ask them, what do I read? And in this case, it's like, what do I consume? So, you know, podcasts. So yeah, I totally think that Rabbit Hole was one of the most powerful examples of like so many different concepts that we've talked about and touched on that we want people to become aware
and maybe
of.
Wes, you know, part of maybe could be another element of the resource page. And I don't know if there's a way to, maybe we just pin and we make a bookmark of who we think are the best disinformation scholars that are on Twitter. Right. So, so maybe we make a bookmark, and can you make a bookmark?
Well, I have a Twitter list that for media literacy, which has got a lot of them, but I think that might be good to really,
because that way it's just one link, and then they can get, because we could have like just on that, it would go for pages. I think you start off with obviously the News Literacy Project, the great work that they do, First Draft, and then some of the individual scholars that we've, you know, talked about. I mean, obviously Renee DeResta is incredible, and Sam Woolley, and some of the other ones. The BBC have some great and very helpful. I had emailed one of the BBC scholars. If I could I could look him up really quick. And he was very, let me see if we can go back. I can't go back far enough on my my Twitter messages, but I asked him, I said, you know, how did you make that graphic, or what program were you using to show how that hashtag beautifully blended out in such a way? And he's like, oh, I use this, use that. You know, this one's might be pricey, but this one's got a free version. And so I've felt that, you know, just send people. Sometimes they get back to you, sometimes they don't. And you know, they're busy, like they don't know who I am, so they're like, it's so. But I think that would be in terms of, you know, I follow a lot of people on Twitter, so you know, there's when you curate a very certain type of Twitter follow, the stuff just falls in your lap. So it's not, it makes life so much easier when you have that, where if you don't follow everyone, but you follow the best people, there are no, chance favors the prepared mind, you know, and as Pasteur would say, and I think that's, if you can have a really, especially for professional development, Twitter is a gift if you do it right. And I can't express how more it's enriched my breadth of understanding on topics that I'm personally interested. Think topics that make me a better teacher, maybe a better ed tech teacher, more, you know, all different types of things. It's just, you know, I can go on. Twitter's also the worst place in the world as well, right? So it's like, you know, there's the web. If it's all, you know, but if you do it right,
full of darkness, you know, full of light. It just depends on, you know, what channels you're going to subscribe to and tune into. So yeah, I think that using Twitter to continue to learn more about media literacy and to network, listening to podcasts, and then, you know, giving people some of those initial resources to say, start here, and then, you know, go further.
You know, one of the other things I was thinking about, I had done this. I was very curious, and this might be another way to kind of do a type of sift as well. Maybe I'm not clever enough to come up with the right acronym for this, but you know, it's probably Wes, you have a bazillion more followers than I do about, but every once in a while I'll just get this person who will like a tweet that I put out there. It's just, you know, weird. And I'm like, I have no idea who this person is. And so it happened probably in the last couple of months. I'm like, let's see what this is all about. So I went through a lot of the various different tools that I know about lateral reading and doing reverse image searches to figure out, okay, now I'm pretty sure that this is a bot, and I'm going to prove to you why that is. And so I could probably go through and reverse engineer, how that whole thing went down as well, to kind of show what that would be. And I also think too, then, is so we could do something where we look at, how do you do conduct a lateral search? We can provide a dummy tweet that we can, and I'll lay out enough things for them to look at. Then we can, talk about like, am I, it's kind of like that lame, was it a web page or something like, am I hot or not? And we can cut the activity.
Oh, that was Facebook. That was the early days of Facebook.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, right. So this segment could be called "Am I bot or not?" And so it could be something where we say, look at who liked this, and then figure out what are the clues in this person's stream, and what are the tells that this is not an actual human being, or whatever that may be. Yeah. And then I thought there might be, and I want to play around with it, because sometimes it doesn't always work. But the University of Indiana, their open source intelligence suite with Hoaxy and all the ways to kind of like, I almost wonder if that's something that we introduce and say, look, go play. Like we
can't be a whole session. That could be
that's the whole lesson as well. I've been trying to figure out a way. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it's janky, and sometimes it works. But I remember I made an animation right when Plandemic came out. I took the name of the doctor, and I put the hashtag, and you can put it in within those days, and then you can see which account, and it's kind of metaphorical. It's very interesting how it showed up, because it actually looks like lungs, like this is what gives breath to this particular conspiracy or hashtag and all of that. So there'll be a way to maybe at least say, look, this is how you could use this tool, how you would track the life span of this hashtag, and how it grows up, and do it by incremental dates, and then you can kind of unpack the meaning of what that is.
So the reference here I put on the screen is the Indiana University Observatory on social media, truthy.indiana.edu, and then /tools is where they've got these, Hoaxy, visualize the spread of claims and fact checking, botometer, check how bot-like a Twitter user behaves, Fakey, play this, game to learn how to recognize fake news on your social feed. So I definitely think that we should introduce that. I created a 10-question Kahoot, which this will be silly to share on the screen. I'll put it into Facebook because it's just too long of a link. But basically, just we've been brainstorming vocabulary words, and so I took 10 of those and then made a little spreadsheet and came up with a Kahoot quiz. So what was Gamergate? What was Pizzagate? What's an internet troll? What's doxing? What are active measures? What's disinformation? What's misinformation? What's malinformation? What is QAnon? What is 4chan? And I think I'm actually going to use that. I'll leave 10 seconds per response. So I think we'll do that as part of the keynote. But if we wanted to do that, we could have that as an activity. But I also think, it'd be great to have multiple activity ideas, because letting people dive in and do a little bit of hands-on, because there's, in terms of sessions, there's the awareness session, which is what a keynote generally is more like. It's a mix actually of entertainment and education, ideally, but it is helping you be aware of things and resources and things that you check out. You don't do them hands-on. But I think in this session, we would like people, because we talked about that great session that we did last year on with the New York Times snowfall, and remind me of who that was.
That was Troy's session on Night Lab tools.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that same model, and maybe we'll just have time to do one breakout or one of those, like not a pre and a post. But I think that idea of here's multiple, lesson ideas, you got rationale, some rationale for doing this, examples, an activity that people can dig into, then some additional strategies and resources for people to consider and other lessons, and then the homework of, here, I think that would be a great thing to share there too. Here's the most impactful podcast episodes and books, a book, because, there's 100 books, but if you tell me the one that impacted you the most on this topic, wow, that's super helpful. So, I mean, I think that's a session.
Like it was fantastic.
I wonder if we could come up with either some actual, back to the, like, let people dig into it with their web literacy skills. I wonder, because we'll be doing this in Zoom, and we can do this in breakout sessions. So we could have maybe 3 or 4, and then ask people to break out and give them like 10 minutes. And then, like on a Padlet, maybe they could collaborate with their resources, and then we could come back and share. But if we came up with either, I mean, the idea of one that you were talking about, fabricating a CNN headline with your daughter in a picture by the river, I can think of one about maybe the pandemic, fake documentary was something that just happened this summer. And then, I don't know, there could be some other ones, but man, I think that.
So what I can do, Wes, I can start because I think we have the type of like the format where it has all like the watermark of the digital or the conference, and I can just start putting together all of the different things, because I think the only thing that I would maybe 10 minutes is a long time to I would almost be okay with like saying, okay, showing, projecting, well, they'll be able to see like what we're projecting, and almost just like doing like a wait time of 30 seconds and then seeing if anyone would say like, what are your eyes getting drawn to here?
What I was thinking about was having like each one is kind of a case study scenario. Yeah. And so room 1 is going to take this tweet, and then together you guys are going to have, and maybe it's not 10 minutes, maybe it's shorter. I wasn't thinking about that with all group. I was thinking about, we go to breakout rooms, and with your breakout room team, that you guys are going to look at this tweet, this Facebook post, this image, and you're going to apply your web literacy skills and see what you come up with. I mean, I think that would be, Kristen is just fired up. I wish I could send messages back to you on Facebook from in here. So, Kristen says, do your workshop, make an anytime workshop for later. Okay. I don't think I know about those. So will you start a slideshow then, like a Google slideshow to start putting that in? Okay. That'll be great. And then we can, come up with these, because I mean, it wouldn't have to be breakout room, but boy, that's a powerful feature of Zoom. Are we going to be in Zoom for all of our sessions? Do you know?
I think so. Yeah. I don't think there's any like Google Meets or anything like that. I think it's going to be Zoom. Okay.
Yeah. And then we can have these other resource ideas. So like the thing about the moon stuff, that's still there's value in that as far as the investigation, but I didn't find that to be the winning. I mean, what I actually think I like as an activity is,
but I don't think you need to. I don't think we ditch that. I think that becomes part of what you discuss, which is, look, this has been a prior experience that's been very problematic, and this is what's happened. Now, I will say though, what's weird and I can't even think about what's in my YouTube, because I listen to music. My daughter watches, silly videos and all that stuff. But I got an advertisement today. And what was I looking up? It was something not even remotely political. If I remember, it was maybe like a how-to something. And I got a full on 30-second ad for the Epoch Times. I don't know if you've seen this. That's pretty fringy stuff right there. And so I'm like, but I was trying to think, like, there's nothing really in my profile because I really try to keep like stuff out of my YouTube, and I was really shocked that there's something sniffing around. So it could be what's going on in my browser is probably indicating what's going on in YouTube. But what I do in YouTube is not really looking into that type of stuff. So it's interesting.
I mean, I probably I can bring real examples, covering up and distorting and blurring, names to protect the innocent of some interactions on Facebook. One of which was, this is a classmate of mine from college, but sharing, lots of different conservative perspectives. But one of these, was a link from that Epoch Times. And I had never heard of them before. Yeah. But doing lateral reading, I went to Wikipedia and read about the different opinions of this group. And so, yeah, that is, I'm excited. I think this sounds like a winning workshop that's going to give people a lot of practical lesson resources and ideas, but will also give us an opportunity to dig into some things. So maybe we can each kind of come up with some ideas for what those breakout media snippets, or whatever we'll call those, will be. And we can pull some potentially that we've actually interacted with, in the not too distant past. And then there could be some fabricated stuff. The other thing that hits me with this is like, a couple things. Number one, I really irritated my wife a lot asking her questions about this. And we, as we talked about this later, like, people don't like to be interrogated. And sometimes people can feel dumb, when people are asking them a lot of different questions. And so I think there's a personal level of this in terms of like how we're going to, with gentleness and kindness and with intention and care, all those little words, interact with people that we follow, that follow us, that, we probably don't want to lose a friendship and just like break a relationship over. But, are we going to engage with this? Are we not? How are we going to do that? And then there's, of course, the student level of what are we going to teach? And then also thinking about how this could fit into different arenas, because, maybe the language arts teachers or the media literacy computer class teachers don't have to have that discussion about, okay, how am I going to get this in? But I think this part of what we want in the whole conference is about is that media literacy is for everybody. And so whatever content area you're teaching, I mean, this needs to be part of your conversations with students.
Yeah, and I'll send this to you. I'm sorry, I'm listening. I'm trying to find the episode. There, great short NPR podcast is called Shortwave, and there was an episode that was May 22nd, How to Correct Misinformation According to Science. And so, great episode. Let's see, I can't quite see how long it was. They're generally like 12 minutes, but they're saying like, look, if you want to if you want to not sure that you either cause people to draw up the bridge over the moat when you're trying to persuade them in such a way, these are some generally good ways to kind of go about it, because how do you if someone's feels very empowered by information that they have that is just flat out a lie or wrong. You can dunk on them, but that's not, you're not going to be able to resume a relationship that's going to hopefully correct what that may be. So there is a very tender rhetorical move that we must have when we go about this, and that's not easy because we know that, again, the purpose of this type of persuasion, this type of disinformation, is to precisely drive those wedges down and split us. So now we're trying to find a way to make sure that we counteract the Roach Motel poison of what that disinformation is, at the same time not poison the relationship between us, but in that disinformation, they want to, the point is to make sure that we calcify these tribal divides that we seem to have that are falling along these political lines. And we had mentioned this maybe in our first episode, which is how unproductive it is to maybe see things that way. Rather, we at least begin the conversation by acknowledging the Venn diagram of what intersects in our shared values. And if you can kind of somehow move around that and dance around that before we show the cards on the table. I'm going to mix all my metaphors here of like, I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican or Trumper, non-Trumper, or whatever it may be. It's so much maybe more productive to at least entangle those things that which we both clearly care about, and then somehow then maybe push the boundaries out from where we've already established that grounds, and then say, I might not convince you today, but we haven't burned the bridge right now. And unfortunately, the medium of Twitter, Facebook is not too concerned with hearing constructive dialogue. Twitter's probably, as much as I love Twitter to inform me, it as a communication tool interpersonally between people that have different ideas seems to be, there's a reward for being more snarky. There's a reward for being more cavalier in the way. And that's unfortunately, that's good when you can bring that back to the tribe, but that's not one that's going to advance what we need to have happen when we have so many big problems.
We talked last time, or maybe it was the first time, I guess, about sort of, skepticism without nihilism.
Yeah.
Is there any element of that you can think of, other than kind of an encouragement at the end, that we might include?
Yeah, I think that was a really good episode. I'm gonna have to re-listen to it and kind of take some notes on it again, because there was some really, I think some important ideas to at least get a foothold in terms of, because ultimately, is it really worth throwing away a relationship because of this moment that we're in right now? Because we happen, because you came across an unfortunate article that you believe to be true, and I always think, like, I need to, if I see that, I have to kind of calm down a little bit.
That's sift, that's stop, right? That's the whole emotional cue of being really aware, when we're emotionally, responding, like, okay, Zen, let's breathe.
There was another really good episode of a different shocking podcast that I was listening to. It's called, the name of the podcast is called You Are Not So Smart. And his name is if I can get to the David McClaney, I believe is his name. But anyway, he does a lot of his episodes are basically trying to make you a more critical thinker, right? And so this is like the one that you posted the other day, Wes. But the most recent episode, he interviews this kind of a behavioral economist, and his name is Dr. Gleb Trubisky. I'm gonna mess up his name. And it's all about how to debias your thinking, and a lot of the methods that he talk about really match up well with the SIFT method, which is stop before you react, wait, and he goes through all the various different techniques to kind of really make sure that your head is clear. So that was episode 184, the blind spots between us. That was the most recent episode. It's very good.
Okay. It's interesting. So they don't have the transcript of that one up yet. It must take him a little while to get that.
Yeah, he had mentioned that he's very busy. He's got some things going on in his life or something like that, where he hasn't updated the webpage with that.
Okay, hold on though. 184, because I'm seeing
episode 184. So it's not, you're gonna have to go to the feed on Apple to get it, because it's not gonna be on the webpage. I noticed the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Wow. All right. So we've been talking here for 54 minutes. But I think we have a plan. I think our
Yeah.
plan is you're going to start the slideshow.
Yeah,
And
I'll get on that next couple days.
Format of what we're going to be doing. Kristen, I may connect with you, Kristen, if you're still watching, to get a little bit more on the Pathwrite, right? Which is a tool that we're going to be using here. I think that building out the resources on that document will be good as well. But the filtered, there was a great presentation that I saw 2 weeks ago, I guess. There's a network of schools called MSON. It's the Malone Network, and our school is the Oklahoma participant. It was Stanford based. It was to basically take the lessons of Stanford Online High School and then share those with schools around the country. I love this lesson format. It was on Google Classroom, but they had 3 panelists. They gave them each time to talk about 3 things they liked for 3 minutes each. And that was it. And kind of like we're talking about with the media resources and recommended, media to consume, this idea of here's 3 podcasts, here's 3 people. I could even see that being a great ad hoc session to be like, okay, share your 3 best channels on Twitter, that you're following or something like that. But I'm really fascinated by this whole thing about filtering. That's the session I did like a year ago in April for the Atlas conference, was called Filtering the Exaflood. And it really, I need to do that some more. And it's kind of like this. There's so much. And then you're like, what do I do? Where do we go? So I wanted to share tools and techniques of basically being able to filter the web effectively. And some of that was through, Twitter lists and Nuzzle and Flipboard and things. But I don't know how many teachers writ large are using these kinds of tools for professional learning. And especially on this topic, there's obviously going to be certain topics where there's just not a lot of people maybe sharing on Twitter. But on what we're talking about here, Twitter and podcasts, and some YouTube, these are the channels to be learning about. And so,
and I think we had mentioned this before. So it seems like that might be a way to just kind of internally mark within the in the slideshow. This is a tool, this is a technique, this is the resource, so just a way to kind of like pin that as we go through, just kind of as a reminder, because I think that's a nice way to kind of reminding us like, oh, we got this balance of content that we're going to be kind of sharing with everyone. But what's interesting, and this is speaking of just kind of the idea of blind spots, is that obviously finding resources on Twitter on Facebook to share with our students is just, it's not where they're at. Twitter, somewhat. Yeah, it's some are there, but I think the tricky part is that we also have to say, like, look, we can also do more work to find how this is manifesting itself in the spaces where they're at. So if that's Instagram, I haven't seen, and maybe this is because I haven't researched it myself, because this is not where I'm at, but I don't know how disinformation makes its way through Snapchat, right? And I haven't seen anyone do research on it yet of the people that I follow on Twitter. So that's a gap. In fact, I think if there was, if I was writing a grant, to go look into open source intelligence and look into disinformation campaigns, like that would be a really interesting place to go to see how that's. But then maybe that's also there might be a reason why that's not there, is because maybe propaganda isn't being targeted to people that young, because they're still somewhat apolitical and may not necessarily move the gears for the type of decisions that are actually going to be a ballot box kind of situation, where that's why we see it happening on Twitter and Facebook so much more aggressively.
Well, and there's 3 levels there too. there's the personal level of how you're going to engage with friends and colleagues and not hopefully not break relationships, lose friends. There's the student part of classes that you're teaching, but then there's also the engagement civically, like all the voters that are out there. I mean, there. It really is a situation where we're outmanned and outgunned in terms of the kinds of education we need to do. And then also, I mean, I like the word frictionless for sharing, like, oh, it's just frictionless. It's so easy. But that's part of the danger today, right? That it's just so easy without saying, what Epic Times, what is that? I don't have time to look at that. Or with pictures. I remember like when the Syrian civil war was a little bit, I guess hotter. I mean, who can vet pictures to know if that was a contemporaneous picture taken from Syria or from another war zone or a different time? I mean, this is where tools are going to have to come to our assistance. But anyway, there's another layer to that, which is like, what are people going to do, in retirement communities? And there's a lot of older, adults, retirees that love to learn and that want to be savvy. So I think there's a layer to this where it's personally relevant, it's instructionally and professionally relevant as far as what we're teaching, but then just also in terms of life, our parents, our aunts and uncles, our family members. So I think this is like taking the conversation out of the niche of the media literacy, literati, and then how, what kinds of strategies and ideas, and that's probably the engagement part. So I like the shortwave and that other reference to that podcast that you mentioned. I think my friend Jason Neiffer and I have shared. There's some other good articles that people have written. I don't know, Atlantic or other places where it's like, how to engage in this highly polarized situation, culture and environment. For the ideal of truth and critical thinking, without causing a flame war,
there was a very clever interactive upshot, I think, article from the New York Times. I want to say it was I think it was last year, and they were saying, okay, it's Thanksgiving, and you're gearing up to go, lock horns with your uncle. It was one of those things, and it was this really clever, almost like choose your own adventure pathway where you would go down and say, okay, they've said this, how do you respond? And then you would click on how you would respond, and then they would kind of basically say, all right, this is probably why that was not productive, what you said. Sure, you feel cavalier that you were able to zing them with that, but you've actually pushed them into the corner that much more. If you responded this way, then this would happen. It was a really, I thought, a very, it was awesome. I mean, I thought it was a very... Was that
a website somebody had built out with that kind of a simulator?
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Just, if you go to the New York Times upshot, or just even type in Thanksgiving arguments, 2019, I think it was last year. That sounds about familiar. So it was excellent. It was just a very, it was interactive. It was like a choose your own adventure. You just kind of go through, and it would say, well, but but they say this, and I think the argument was, this was pre-COVID, obviously. So I think the case study for the argument was, what do we do about family separations at the border, and how do you have a productive conversation about that during Thanksgiving with the uncle that that's just frothing at the mouth to argue with you about it. So but to go back to our point, like, it's still your uncle, you still have to like, is it really worth, like, I mean, is it worth driving, a wedge in your family, because of this issue? Obviously, some people are ready to do that, but it's like, we're adults here, and we have to be loving of each other, and it's worth fighting a better way in order to make sure that we appeal to their heart.
If you can find that link and drop that in, that would be great. And I like how we're connecting psychology to this. That's something that Tristan Harris on the Your Undivided Attention podcast does so well, is talk about psychology and the ways that the mind works and how propaganda is effective, and the psychological side. And what I'm reminded of is, rehearsal and the importance of rehearsing, responses. I think of um, Stephen Glenn's book, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. And they're talking about, self-destructive behaviors and how do you help, for instance, peer pressure, kids prepare for all kinds of different situations. Well, actually role playing them and speaking them out. I'm reminded of principal training at Texas Tech when I was there and this was for superintendents too, but, getting mid-management certification, getting a master's or a doctorate in educational leadership, there were all these scenarios. And so they would play stuff out and somebody would be the PR person that's there. And you've just had a tornado at school or a shooting. And then the person has to stand up and talk and defend. So that idea of a gamified situation where you're being presented with some different options and then you're choosing, and then you have because we started last time talking about a choose your own adventure kind of model. Not that we're building that out for this, but as an idea for a simulation and an activity that might really be helpful, not only for students, but for others as well, looking at the different options that you have for how you respond, and then, seeing what the result of that is. There are some open source tools that can allow you to build a choose your own adventure story, and write those kind of things. So anyway, that could be possibly another rabbit hole or another venue or just project idea, lesson idea.
And maybe that'll be next year, so we can build that out for next year.
Or kids could build it, right? This could literally be something that students could build, because analytically, as they're thinking about that and constructing that would be even more impactful than just simply doing a simulation. But I think those ideas are solid. So we have a plan. I've been texting Kristen. I'm going to give her a call tomorrow afternoon. And I think that, what did she say here? She talked about, the 18-year-olds are pushing the agenda. Huh. Yeah. Well, isn't that interesting too? Buying up tickets. Wasn't that fascinating with the Trump?
Well, here's the thing about that. Yes, that might be true, but where is chicken or egg, right? And, was that truly an organic movement amongst 12 or 13-year-olds? Where was the first documented post that created the virality of that? And how was that amplified? Yeah. We haven't seen that, right? And I think that's the part that I would love to know. About that. Was it truly a movement? And because those things can happen organically in its virality, but you just have to leave a very big heap of doubt to say but this was done on a platform that has incredible ties to one of our global competitors, right? So that's not being conspiratorial thinking. That's just saying literally what's happening here. It'd be no different than saying, if RT was, telling you the kids to do that, right? And so only that would be so flagrant, but it can be, astroturfed, to use that's another kind of maybe, word, to use for information, that it looked organic when really it was being amplified.
Well, that's where you get into the countermeasures of the countermeasures, and we're seeing that kind of thing too. Even with the pandemic thing, I think, and people who are, oh my gosh, it's so deep into psychological warfare, information warfare.
Yeah, I mean, I think that episode for the Prophet is just that's just my default position. It's just okay, I'm going to listen to that, and I'm going to think of every scenario why that may not be what my eyes and ears are telling me to see, and it might be real, but I have to cordon off some part of this to not be disappointed to find out that it's not true. So
the velocity of virality on TikTok is astounding, right? And so anyway, these conversations are going to continue to be relevant, even though tools will change and the issues. So sounds good. We have a plan. Well, where can people find you?
Cool. So maybe we'll talk some other point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say one more time, Wes.
Do we want to have another meeting before next week? Do we want to maybe touch base like Friday
maybe Sunday?
Yeah.
Are we Monday or Tuesday? I forgot what day we're going.
I don't know. I didn't see. So yeah, why don't let's look for Sunday night. That sounds good. Okay.
Sure. Sounds good. Let me think. Yeah, Sunday sounds good. So we could do that. So, and then we'll have more of the, I should have the slideshow pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be in there too. So, cool. All right. Well, you are We Go Twits on the Twitters. I am W Fryer. We've got resources on medialiteracy.wesfryer.com/concw. And we appreciate those of you that have tuned in live, and anybody who's listened to this after the fact. Please let us know any thoughts or suggestions you have, because these are going to be resources that will remain on the web, and obviously we're not only hoping that these are things that folks benefit from at this conference, but they're things that we take in our own lives to become more informed citizens and more informed professionals, but also think about how we're going to take these into the classroom and utilize them with students.
Cool. All right, Wes, I'll see you Sunday.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.